A strange metal container at the bottom of the sea created headlines after local scientists found this mysterious object on the ocean floor. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary shipping container, but it contained an incredible secret inside. When their underwater robot pulled it up and the thick metal doors opened, everyone who saw it went completely pale. The discovery of this container wasn't by chance. That morning, Coast Guard sensors detected major disturbances in the water, and underwater sound reports kept coming in. Only something very heavy falling into the ocean could create this kind of disturbance. So Captain Catherine Sullivan's research team got the job of looking into these unusual vibrations. The sensor that picked up the strongest signals was roughly 20 meters from the coastline. After Catherine and her crew reached the location, they immediately started working. Since Catherine served as both captain and lead scientist, it was normal for her to go underwater first. She went down and spotted what they were looking for in just a few minutes. There was an enormous shipping container sitting on the sea bottom. When Catherine came back to the surface, she quickly told her team to send down their underwater robot. "We need to get that thing up to our boat," she ordered. Fortunately, they hadn't left their research center with just any ordinary ship. Their vessel had advanced equipment that Catherine knew how to operate. With Catherine's instructions ready, her team got the underwater drone prepared for the deep dive. As they lowered the machine into the water, Catherine took control, and the most exciting part of their mission began. When the robot reached the container, it was time to start the lifting process. The machine wrapped its metal arms around the sides of the container. However, this proved much harder than they had expected. The container weighed much more than anticipated. Their ship's lifting equipment could handle massive objects, but somehow this simple shipping container was making their machinery struggle incredibly hard. "What in the world is inside that thing?" Catherine asked. Shipping containers usually aren't completely sealed from water, so when you lift one from the ocean bottom, you'd normally expect water to pour out from every opening. But strangely, that didn't happen here. Somehow, this ordinary-looking shipping container was sealed tight, as if it was built to keep every bit of water from getting inside. But what was the reason for this? The ship's strong workers, who did the heavy lifting for the crew, had already begun trying to open the door handle. But Catherine told them to be cautious. "We have no idea what's inside there," she warned. Everyone waited for Catherine's signal. After taking several deep breaths, she decided it was the right moment. "Open it up, but go slowly," she instructed. Little by little, the container doors began to swing open. When the door finally opened completely, everyone watching instantly turned pale. No one could have imagined they would discover something so strange. The person most shocked was Catherine herself. Catherine left her crane controls and moved closer to the puzzling container. She quietly walked past her crew members and stepped into the open container. The woman's eyes grew wider than they had ever been. Catherine's fingers touched every object inside the container. Some items were made from wood, while others had fabric coverings. These were things that shouldn't be found in a place like this. With each item Catherine examined, her confusion grew stronger. She turned around to face her crew. At first, nobody spoke. They had talked about what might be in the container, but no one expected this. Catherine was the first to speak. "What is all this? Did someone actually live in here?" she asked. Her voice showed complete disbelief because the contents looked strangely like a home. She asked her colleagues to explain what they were seeing, but none of them had any answers. Catherine stepped back to look at the entire container and shook her head. She couldn't find any words. The container's interior was completely set up like a living space. It had a bed, a couch, a closet, and a table with chairs. It contained everything a normal home would have. But then Catherine noticed something chilling. Crude ventilation holes had been drilled through the metal walls, barely large enough to let air through. These holes. Someone made these to breathe. she whispered, her voice trembling. "Has anyone here ever seen anything like this before?" Catherine asked her team. But everyone in the group felt the same shock and confusion about this weird discovery. There were so many questions. Where did this come from? Who would live this way? And why would they do it? It didn't take long for the team to begin examining everything carefully. Catherine was amazed not just because the container was fully furnished, but also because most things were still in their proper places. They quickly found out that everything was attached to the floor with nails. But some loose objects were scattered around, and they discovered photographs of a man with his family. Hidden beneath the photos were fake identity documents and forged cargo manifests. "Look at this," one crew member called out urgently. "These papers are all counterfeit. The names don't match, and these stamps look completely fake. Did he live in the container, or did his whole family? Who were these people, and what had happened to them?" They kept searching to find answers to these questions. They examined every inch of the container but couldn't find anything that brought them closer to understanding the truth. Catherine made a frustrated sound and was ready to give up when one of her colleagues suddenly shouted with excitement. When she looked around, she saw him holding up a clear plastic bag. What made him so excited was what he found inside it. Some kind of recording device. Catherine hurried over to him and carefully took the bag. Maybe this could provide some answers. Catherine held the bag very carefully, worried that any wrong move might break it or damage whatever was recorded inside. The bag had been stored very carefully, and when she opened it, Catherine immediately saw that the device was still completely dry. This was a promising sign, and she pressed the play button hopefully. Even though the recorder looked dry and Catherine felt optimistic, her heart still jumped when she heard a voice. The group made excited sounds, and Catherine motioned for everyone to be quiet so they could hear the recording. It was a man's voice, probably the same man from the photographs. This was encouraging. It was difficult to understand the recording while they were out on the ocean, so the group quickly went inside the ship. At first, they only heard background sounds, but then the voice became clear. "I have to record this before they realize we're here and catch us," the voice said. Someone responded in the background. The voice sounded frightened, making the first words of the recording very scary. There was a brief, quiet moment. Then the man coughed and said his name was Tariq Hassan. "I hope someone finds this container and this recording and can help us. People's lives are in danger," he said quickly. The recording suddenly stopped. Catherine looked at her colleagues who all had the same expression of complete shock and confusion. What kind of situation had they gotten involved in? What was really happening? The message sounded terrible, and they wanted to help this person. But how could they? Then the recording started again. The recorder made crackling sounds, and the quality wasn't as good as before. Catherine moved closer to hear what the voice was saying. "We desperately need help. We're on the MV Stellar Dawn, but I don't know how much longer we have. Please rescue us," the voice pleaded. The man's voice became more and more desperate. Then the recorder stopped working again. Catherine tried to make it work, but nothing she did helped. It was completely broken. The room became completely silent. They were all speechless. Everyone understood that something horrible had happened to the people who owned this container. But what exactly had occurred? And was there any way they could help them? When they looked up information about the ship, they found it had been reported at various ports multiple times, but it only stayed for short periods each time. It only got fuel and moved very little cargo even though it was full of containers. Catherine wrinkled her forehead and sighed. Why would a ship carrying shipping containers visit ports so rarely and not load or unload its containers? This strange behavior really puzzled Catherine and seemed very suspicious. She talked about it with her colleagues, who all agreed that something fishy was going on with that ship. Catherine looked through the shipping database again, hoping to learn more about this vessel. She pulled up the GPS tracking system, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she traced the ship's route. "This is impossible," she muttered, staring at the screen. "Look at this pattern. They've been circling the same areas for weeks, never staying in port long enough for proper inspections." She got excited when she saw where it was last spotted. "It's not far from here," she exclaimed. The strange reports in the shipping records and the frightening recording were enough to convince Catherine to try finding this ship. The place where the vessel was last seen wasn't very far away, so they could get there quickly. If they understood the man in the recording correctly, time was running out. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. Catherine made sure everyone on board understood the situation and shared her concerns. She gave the ship's captain the coordinates of where the suspicious ship was last located. When they arrived, they found the vessel floating 20 kilometers from shore, strangely motionless. Feeling both curious and nervous, Catherine and her colleagues knew this wasn't just a regular research mission. The tone of the recording suggested something much more serious was happening. "I'm going to contact the Coast Guard and police," Catherine said with determination. When the authorities arrived, Catherine made sure their vessel stayed hidden from the cargo ship's sight. She quickly explained the situation and played the disturbing recording. "We've contacted port authorities in 3 different countries," one of the officers reported grimly. "This ship has been flagged for irregular cargo manifests and suspicious docking patterns." Thankfully, the police believed her story, but there was a problem. The ship's crew might fight back if they tried to board officially. If they saw law enforcement coming, they would probably refuse to let anyone on board. Catherine had an idea for getting around this problem. Police officers could pretend to be scientists. "Tell them we're studying fish migration patterns and their ship is in a perfect spot for observation," she suggested. With their disguises ready, Catherine and 2 officers approached the container ship in a small boat. As they got closer, their radio crackled with intercepted communications from the ship. "Hide everything now," a panicked voice shouted in broken English. "Inspection boat approaching." Catherine's blood ran cold. "They know something's wrong," she whispered to the officers. As they got closer, she asked for permission to come aboard, but something felt wrong immediately. The ship's captain seemed hesitant. Catherine kept explaining their fake research story while the crew ran around on deck, giving orders. After waiting a long time, they lowered a ladder and the 3 of them climbed up. "You have 1 hour," the captain said coldly, then walked away. Catherine and the officers walked among the containers, calling out loudly. "Tariq Hassan, are you somewhere here?" they shouted. All of a sudden, a container door flew open and someone pulled them inside. What they discovered completely shocked them. Dozens of people were living inside the container. The faces staring back at them showed fear, hope, and desperate exhaustion. "Please," a woman whispered in broken English, "we need help." Others spoke in languages Catherine couldn't understand, but their pleading eyes said everything. Inside the container, a man demanded to know who they were. Catherine immediately knew his voice. It was the same man from the recording. She explained how they had discovered his message. His facial expression changed and became softer. "I can't believe this is really happening," Tariq said with relief in his voice. "This is our opportunity to escape from this terrible ship." Tariq told them what was really going on. The ship's captain and crew had been holding people prisoner, making them work on the vessel against their will. He had been trapped for 2 years, while others had been there even longer. Living conditions in the containers were awful. When Tariq tried to organize a rebellion, the crew fought back. They threw his container into the ocean, hoping to stop him from causing trouble. But before they did this, he managed to hide his message, hoping someone would eventually find it. After he finished telling his story, the container became completely quiet. Catherine and the officers were stunned by what they had learned. What they had discovered was much worse than they had imagined. Families were being held captive, living in terrible conditions. They needed to take action immediately. The police gathered important information about how many crew members there were and whether they might resist. They organized a surprise attack. It worked perfectly. The crew was quickly arrested, and the Coast Guard took control of the ship. Catherine helped Tarek free all the families. "We need interpreters immediately," she radioed to shore. "We have victims from at least 4 different countries here." As translators arrived by helicopter, the full horror of the situation became clear. Families separated, children who hadn't seen sunlight in months, people who had given up hope of ever being rescued. Shortly after, the ship arrived at the closest city where emergency shelters were set up for the victims. It didn't take long for news reporters to learn about the story. It became a major news story across the country. Catherine followed the news coverage closely as she traveled back home. She felt grateful that the victims were now safe and proud that she had helped bring justice. She was happy to see that everything had ended well and extremely pleased that she had been part of making it happen. Did you enjoy this story? If you found that container with the desperate recording, would you risk going to look for the ship yourself or just call the police and let them handle it? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Be brave when people need help. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.